Okay, welcome to the 27th show in a series of shows focused on Brookline as an age-friendly community. In 2012, the World Health Organization designated Brookline as its first community in New England to be an age-friendly community. This was a result of a whole set of attributes that were achieved by the Brookline Select Board, Brookline residents, the town departments, and a lot of work by the Brookline CAN volunteer organization that works on issues for Brookline residents of all ages. Now we're in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're obviously operating in an isolated mode, and older adults are especially isolated. This show will focus on a set of older adults, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender community, the LGBT community. And our guest is Bob Linscott. Bob is the Assistant Director of the LGBT Aging Project that's at the Fenway Institute in Boston. Bob is one of the country's leading advocates of LGBT aging, and his work was highlighted in the award-winning documentary Gen Silent. And that work resulted in making the Elder Care Network more welcoming and inclusive for the LGBT older adults. Bob is also a member of the Massachusetts Commission of the LGBT Aging. He's a co-chair of the American Society on Aging LANE, which is the LGBT Aging Issues Network. His work has led to LGBT training curricula for senior centers and home care agencies, and more than 23 meal centers for LGBT community. Bob is a board member also of the LGBTQ Senior Housing Incorporated. It's an affordable housing group. And separately, he spent 20 years teaching meditation and mindfulness at Brown University Mindfulness Center and at the UMass Memorial Healthcare and at Massachusetts General Hospital. Bob has a Bachelor of Science from Emerson and a Master of Theological Studies from the Harvard Divinity School. Welcome, Bob.
Thanks, Matt. It's great to be here.
Well, you're almost here. We're virtual.
Virtually here, yeah.
So I'd really like to start out with the LGBT Aging Project. It's something you told me a little bit about, and I've watched a little about it, and I'm really interested. And I think our audience is.
Yeah, so I want to just back up a little bit. I just want to say thank you to you for including us, but even beyond that, like Brookline itself has just done so much ever since their commitment to start doing the age-friendly work from the very get-go. They have been doing age-friendly, but with such inclusiveness and with an eye to who else is not at the table, and to make sure everyone has a place at the table. And from the very beginning, all the leaders in this whole movement in Brookline have been making sure that the LGBT older adults are part of this mission too. So I had never known that designation was the first designation, and I'm just so impressed. It doesn't surprise me because Brookline is doing great stuff, and I love seeing all of what is happening at the senior center there too. It's such a hub of activity and such a hub of diversity and inclusion there too. So so your question about the LGBT Aging Project, and I just got to point out too that what's really interesting is that this is a situation of you get lemons and you get lemonade out of whatever that expression is. It's not with me right now. Making lemonade out of lemons, whatever. But here's this pandemic, this global pandemic that we all find ourselves in, and suddenly in the midst of that, at the very beginning, we started realizing that it was disproportionately affecting different communities. So we started seeing its impact on communities of color, especially African American communities, immigrant communities, and now just decimating the Native American population, Native American communities. So all of these things have had different effects, and so it gives us an opportunity to look at all different communities and how they're structured and set up, and how it's impacted each one uniquely. And so there's been opportunities for people to draw attention to the LGBT older adult community too. So I'm sure that's probably what brought us on your radar screen to talk about this. But just to give you a sense about this, and for your listeners too, listeners, viewers, where they're right now.
They can in every way they can.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and I just will say that it's okay if you all of a sudden have this moment as you're watching us right now going, oh, LGBT elders, I never really thought about that. And that's so common. We call it the light bulb moment, you know?
Right.
When people think about like, oh, I never thought about this. So many people think of gay pride, and they think of young people like, you know, college age, whatever, out there dancing, whatever like that. They don't think about 80, 90-year-old older lesbians or older gay men, or, you know, it's just not on people's radar screen unless there's someone in their family. And now, thankfully, we've seen so much more visibility around this. So more people do have, you know, colleagues, friends, you know, kids, grandkids that are part of the community. So we came into being the LGBT Aging Project back in about 2001, 2002. And what was happening at the time was that there was this concern that the Elder Service Network was not thinking about LGBT older adults. They were just focused on elder care, but not thinking in specifics on what might be needed for this particular community. And the gay community was not thinking about older adults in their own community. So the LGBT elders are falling in the cracks between both communities, and who's going to be there to care for them. And what is important to recognize when you think about, and just I'm sure in the back of your mind, Matt, you think about all the shows that you have done and all the guests that you've had, and you think about the reality of aging, that it's not easy. Aging is challenging. But thankfully that there are so many systems in place, and such an incredible support network for so many, not everybody, but for many older adults. They have one of the most basic things is having a partner or spouse to age through, you know, this life with.
And by the way, I will say, even the difference between being completely alone, separate from everything else, completely alone, and having someone that you can that's with you or that you can rely on is unbelievable. In my experience over the last few months, I've seen all different types of people, and it immediately makes a tremendous difference.
Yeah. Although it's funny, sometimes the grass is always greener, because I have heard some people that are just really challenged about being isolating alone, and then other people are like, oh my God, I'm ready to kill my wife, or, you know, I'm ready to kill my husband. So, but go ahead, sorry.
We do have abuse situations.
Yeah. So what I was just saying was that's such a critical part of growing older, is having someone, as you said, right there with you. And then with many of those relationships and marriages, you know, come children, and then come grandchildren. And so here's this level of support of you know, family. And then there is community. Think of like the Brookline Senior Center, and how much of an activity that is there. And then community centers, and then the Elder Service Network, and then the faith community, churches and synagogues and temples and things like that are, you know, so there's just this huge umbrella net of these support systems. So when you think about LGBT older adults, and you think about our particular population of older adults, and these are people right now that are, you know, and isn't it funny too that our whole idea of an older adult has just, in the last 10 years, that in itself has just changed. It's like, it used to be like 60 something. No, now when I'm talking about seniors or whatever like that, I'm talking 70s, you know, upper 70s, 80s and upwards.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really important, actually. We haven't emphasized that enough, but there is.
Yeah, if someone that was 65 came into one of our LGBT community meal programs, I would be putting an apron on them, thinking, you must be here to volunteer, like, you know. So But what I'm thinking about right now is our is people who are in, upper 70s and 80s and upwards, and what it was like for them when they were coming of age back in the 40s, the 50s, and in the early 60s. Not okay. It was not safe to be your authentic self, to identify that you're lesbian, you're gay, you're bisexual, transgender. If anyone found out this information, you could lose. There was no protection, so you'd lose your job. If you had children, you'd lose the custody of children. Housing, you immediately evicted. Everything was working against you. You couldn't go to the police for anything because you could be easily arrested. It was against the law in all 50 states. And in the medical, there was no such thing as like going to seek a therapist or out there. You could be, institutionalized against your will of this, because it was considered a mental illness. That wasn't even changed until 1972. So there's all these fears, and so then. So most folks just knew that felt that they were gay or lesbian or trans, would just fly under the radar screen, not draw attention to themselves, tried their best to kind of get through life. And it's a little bit easier to blend in as opposed to someone who is, has a different racial background. So it's very obvious in the LGBT community, you could try and blend in. The minute that you're partnered with someone, you stand out like a sore thumb, like, oh, there's two older women together or two men together. So that accounts for the fact that most of our older adult LGBT population, majority of them are aging alone. So they're aging alone they don't have that spouse, don't have the opportunity to have children and therefore grandchildren. And they are very much estranged from their families of origins, that, their siblings and cousins and whatever like that, just because the idea of shame was so huge at that time. So look at that right there. There's 80% of the caregiving that we know people take for granted of is, partner, kids, grandkids, other family members gone. So just eradicated. And then the fears for our LGBT older adults, if they were to walk into a community space, a senior center, a community center, and immediately be judged, their peers are the ones that were harassing and bullying them when they were in the 60s and 70s. So they automatically feel they will not be accepted. That's kind of the default thinking so many times, that people are not going to be welcoming that if they find out they're gay. And then I already mentioned the institutions. So that's why the Aging Project came into being, to create a system to work in the state with the Elder Service Network to help the network become more welcoming and inclusive. Other places have done their own separate service delivery system for LGBT folks, but we were like, why do that? Massachusetts has such an amazing Elder Service Network. So why don't we get into that, make that more competent for this population, and then be able to work with an individual senior centers, councils on aging, aging service access points, so that they understand the issues, and then they can begin to do the outreach so that they can find the people in their communities who are aging alone and without these supports, and connect them to services. So that's what we do. And then we do a lot of community building in the LGBT older adult community, because there is such social isolation, and that certainly pre-COVID, that was a reality.
This has nothing to do with COVID. I mean,
Yeah,
this
exactly.
so far it's all the work you're doing is needed, has nothing to do with COVID at all.
No.
What happens when you then get hit with a pandemic? Well, what is the impact? It seems to me, I understand some of it because of the isolation, et cetera, but there's something about a pandemic. It brings back memories to me. It brings back memories of when HIV came out. It brings back memories of flu back in the 60s, the Asian flu. And in each case, there was fear, and fear of certain people, either the sick people or certainly gay and lesbian, gay especially, and back in the HIV early days.
Yeah. And I'm glad you noticed that, because that was so re-traumatizing, especially for older gay men, to go back through that before. And what was really particularly troubling for us watching all of this was that when that was happening back in the 80s and during the AIDS epidemic, that as you remember, there was not a lot of work being done to try to really eradicate that and stop that or whatever like that. And so many people just realized, oh, that we're disposable. People don't care. They don't, because this is affecting gay people, there's not going to be that much, attention on this. And then now a lot of our older adults were feeling at the beginning of this, like, well, we're disposable again, because this is just affecting older adults. At the very beginning, remember that the whole threat was like, oh, we got to do all these things because of our seniors. And, other people like, I'm not going to, lose my job and stay home and not work and get a paycheck because of seniors or whatever. So that was very traumatic for a lot of folks. But you're right. You think about the 80s when it was like, for me, I was just coming out then, and there was such fear. They were like, the HIV is, you get it on toilet seats, you get it on doorknobs, you get it on this. And if you eat at people's houses, if they're gay people are coming over, they'd have to eat on paper plates and stuff like that. And we are right back there again, like not knowing it, especially when we were back in March and April, not knowing where this, and we were fully masked and covered and walking around. So it was very re-traumatizing for folks. But
what are you actually doing to reach out to these people separate from your existing aging project? Is there anything different that's required?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting in the last 20 years, we have just kind of built up this whole structure in Massachusetts of having, for example, I'll use one example, is the you mentioned this at the top of the show, the 23 LGBT friendly congregate meal sites. And what that means is these are the same, the congregate meal sites for older adults to come to that happen in churches and community centers and senior centers, whatever. In Massachusetts, we started the very first one at Emmanuel Church that was LGBT friendly. Now, this was not exclusive for just LGBT people. This was, anyone could come to it, but it was kind of marketed as LGBT friendly, so that you knew coming in there that the LGBT older adults were accepted. So now, 20 years later, we have 23 of these all across the state. So we've got those. We've helped support, build community groups. Like we've worked with the LGBT older adult communities of color to really create a whole social network for them called Flashback Sunday. It's EOC, our LGBT Elders of Color group. So all these great social groups, there's older lesbian groups, so there's groups for gay men. Such a rich network here in Massachusetts. And one of our, when Ann Hartstein was the secretary of elder services of the EOEA, she said there's no better place, and she was absolutely right, there's no better place to age as an older LGBT person in the United States than in Massachusetts, because we worked so closely with the Elder Service Network, and there's just such a great partnership there. And then the pandemic came, and all those meal sites closed overnight. All of those the prime timers and the rally and the Stonewall lifelong learning and the meal programs shut down and shuttered. So, and so you're left with, anyone that's like from 30s, 40s, and lower down 50s, or they're like, okay, well, we can just figure out how to translate this to Zoom and stuff like that. But when you're talking about people 70, 80, and 90, the technology divide is huge. And so that didn't happen overnight. So what we did is we started doing Zoom classes and teaching older adults how to learn how to use, our LGBT older adults, how to use Zoom. So before that, I had a full head of hair, and now, no. But I tell you, that was not easy. Trying to get people that have never used something like that, a platform, an online video chat platform, to try and get them to feel comfortable with this was really hard. So we did that. We would teach groups of people how to use, and we had, what I first did was took about a half a dozen LGBT older adults and really worked solidly with them till they felt really comfortable in it. And then I harnessed them to help me teach other people. So then we could all keep teaching more and more. It reminded me of that old, like, was it the Prel commercial? And then she told two friends, and she told two friends, and she told two, something like Prel. So that more and more people could then spread this out and feel they could get connected and see each other face to face again. So that was really important. And of course, that also assumed that those people could participate in that had a computer, that had internet activity, that there's connectivity there. The larger system that we did was we got a team of volunteers immediately to start calling all LGBT older adults that we had contact information for. And so we would call, volunteers will call them at home and just ask a series of questions. Do you have any immediate needs like groceries and whatever like that, medications? And then ask them a number of other questions about, go ahead.
In doing that, do you get any intergenerational? You were talking about the issues of intergenerational caring in this situation. Do you get younger people?
Younger people making the phone calls. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that was really, because there were so many, I mean, this affected, as you know, it affected all of it. There's no one escaped. There's no one that escaped this whole experience of the pandemic. So younger LGBT folks were also sitting home isolated and wishing they could do something. And so when there was this opportunity to reach out and do something for, for older adults, it was great. And one of the questions that they would ask is, do you want to have a regular caller, like someone to call and check in on you? Because again, look at this thing, Matt, about like the difference here between, and I don't mean like every older adult, every heterosexual older adult has a spouse or has kids or has great relationship with their families. Yes, tons of those people as well, aging by themselves alone with not a lot of contacts. But this particular population, not having people check in on, not having kids going, "Mom, are you okay?" or whatever like that. So to get these volunteers to reach out and check in, and many of those wanted a regular call, and those volunteers have been the ones to keep calling them back. And so now we go back and check in again. Do you need a mask? What else do you need? And we would also ask them about what technology do they have? Do they know how to use? Do they have internet access? Can they have a computer, a smartphone, or anything like that? Or would they be interested in a Zoom class? So little by little, we've been trying to get everyone reconnected and build a whole new infrastructure to get the folks connected.
So Bob, we're getting towards the end, towards the end. And I'm really interested in the point we're at this moment, which is things are opening up and we're going forward. And there's also hot spots and there's problems. At this moment, what do you see going forward as the key issues?
No change. I don't see any change because our folks are saying that, yeah, the things we may even get to phase 4 or whatever, but they're not going to go back. It's just too risky. Like so many folks are dealing, any older adults, not just LGBT folks, are just dealing with so many, heart issues, lung issues, whatever like that, and they don't want to put their lives at risk. Some of these folks say, if I step outside, like I'm one of these extreme at-risk people, and so they're going to be confined to their homes a lot longer than the rest of the population when they go back. So we need to think now about mental health issues and what are other ways to keep people connected? What are other ways to find spaces like, intermediary spaces where we take the step, and they'll be long after phase 4, but we find maybe it's like using Brookline Senior Center as an example. We would say, we're going to have this distanced event on such and such a date. We can only take so many in there to allow people, and we're like, get in with a team, and we scrub everything down beforehand, let folks come in and keep them way apart. A lot of us have tried this on our own. I went to a friend's daughter's graduation party, and she had the chairs all spread. It was outside and whatever. So to think about how we could do things like that slowly. So seniors some of our seniors have a taste of what it's like to slowly step foot back in, because it'll be very traumatic. It'll be a big jump to think about stepping out again. Some of our folks I've heard that I've spoken to on the telephones think they're not going to outlive this, which is really sad. They think they will not live long enough to see the world get back to any kind of sense of normalcy that they once knew. So I hope that we can find a little bit of hope and promise that there will be opportunities to come together, and we'll keep them in a very safe and protected space. The Aging Project has worked so hard all these years to create safe spaces. So this is going to be it'll be a new version of safe spaces. It's going to be a healthy safe space and hopefully COVID-free safe space.
So one of the things I've noticed is, for instance, the synagogue I'm with, they're doing their services obviously in Zoom, but they're going to continue that even when they have spaced out distancing services internally. They're continuing the Zoom services at the same time, so that so there are new things you can do going forward that will actually be an advantage and an improvement over the past, that will take care of people who don't feel more that they need to stay isolated, but at the same time want to connect.
Yeah, yeah, that's brilliant, because like, what a sad thing if your synagogue said, oh, we can all come back together again, we're at phase 4, like let's pull the plug on the Zoom and just meet back in the synagogue. There's people that are not going to be ready for that yet, and the fact that you're doing both of those simultaneously is fantastic.
I think more of that is, and I'm hearing you think that too, is that more of new things going forward and new ways of, like the spacing, like you described at the senior center, or there are places where you can go for walks where you can spread out very much and at least see people that are there. And
and this has been a big surprise for a lot of folks. Like there are seniors that just resisted the technology stuff, and now they're like Zoom pros, getting in there because they had to do it. That was the only way to communicate. But, and the fact that we've often thought about with the meal programs, these the congregate meal programs that are LGBT friendly, they're great. They act like little ad hoc senior centers. But what happens when someone has hip surgery or something like that, and they can't travel or can't get out? Or we live in New England. Hello, we've got another nor'easter that comes barreling in, and it's not safe to travel. Then what do you do if that's your whole sense of connection and you can't get there? And now we realize, wow, we could do this, keep people feel connected face to face through things like Zoom or FaceTime, whatever.
FaceTime or any of the various.
Any of them, yeah.
We're an equal opportunity. Google Meets, Microsoft Teams, whatever.
There's so many of them, but I do hope that the larger infrastructure looks at this and say they need to have a little bit more senior-friendly devices that are out there for people that's easy, more like a plug and go, put it in, and then boom, that the platform pops right up.
That concerns me because the focus right now is more and more of the power user, and that you have to watch both. I mean, a power user needs to be at the same time, you need to be able to work with someone who's either less experienced or doesn't want to do all those things, but just want to. Right.
And if you can't be there in person to help them navigate, like, push this and touch this, it's it's like the blind leading the blind. It's really challenging.
Yeah. Well, we probably should do a program on that when I think about it.
Yeah.
We have an expert on our team who could really teach that. And maybe that's a good idea going forward, bring somebody in.
Yeah.
So is there anything else? I always give you an opportunity. Is there anything else you want to say before we come to an end?
No, I think that there's a bit of sadness. I mean, we're speaking now, this will probably get aired at different times or whatever. We're speaking in the month of June, which is always a Pride Month, and for the LGBT community, and that couldn't happen this year. And and this was the 50th anniversary for Boston Pride too. So it was going to be a big celebration. So we hopefully will remember next year and really put our real focus in on that. And then the other thing that I just wanted to acknowledge, and not only, we're dealing with dual crises right now, not only the COVID pandemic, but all the stuff that's coming out about our structural racism and all the issues that come with that. So, and that deeply affects our community. And I just came out of the luncheon that Ethos did with the mayor. And I love that the mayor jumped right in and said, you showed us, you paved the way, you showed us how to overcome that in the LGBT community. We need to look to you to help understand and just eradicate racism, because we did it around homophobia. It's not done yet, but it's a bit different world than it was back in the 70s and 80s, whatever. And so let's use the strength that you built up and address this again with racism.
Great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And now I think we're reaching the end. So let me just sign off and thank everybody. Thank you again, and thank everybody for watching the show, and recognition that the show will be rebroadcast probably on Dave, the Brookline Interactive Group, several times besides this, and also available on the websites of Brookline Can, Brookline Big, and YouTube, and also available on the accounts, the Twitter and Facebook accounts.
And Matt, can I ask you a question? If people, any of your viewers that want to get in touch with me with the Aging Project, will we be able to put my email and phone number on some of these sites or whatever?
Let's remind everybody that it's going to show up right on the end credits.
Oh, perfect.
Your contact information.
Awesome. Thank you.